in today's session, we have to start discussion on this approval workflow. So, like we'll discuss like how basically we have to configure the approval workflow and what about different criteria that we have to use like while configuring this approval workflow. But before going to further, like let me ask you just one question to just refresh your knowledge. So, can anyone tell me how we can configure this approval workflow in Upstream, or how we can configure the approval workflow in the sourcing?
Sorry, can you repeat your question? How do we configure the workflow in where? Sorry.
Okay, how we can configure this approval workflow in sourcing module, sourcing?
I don't know. Previously, you mentioned tasks only, right?
I don't know. I'm just asking how we can configure the approval workflow in sourcing, or you can say how we can configure the approval workflow in downstream in upstream solution.
Downstream means we have
no, upstream. I'm talking about upstream. How we can configure the approval workflow in upstream, like in sourcing, contract, or SLP? Anyone? No, that is incorrect. Abhishek, Audrey, Ganesh, how we can configure the approval workflow in upstream?
You mean like processor, like parallel, serial, like that? Custom, parallel, serial, you can configure like that.
Okay. Any further questions from anyone?
I mean, no, probably from tasks, but not sure how to go about it.
Okay. Another question is that what are the different approval flow workflow type Ariba offering to customer? What are the different approval flow workflow types are available in the Ariba?
Series, parallel, and series and parallel, and customization. Series come parallel merge.
Okay. Any further questions? I think you guys should be like that be clear on this part, because these are the very important questions from interview perspective. So if when we attend the interview, you may get this type of question because these are the very important topic. So the first question, like that how we can configure the approval workflow in upstream. So that is very simple, like with the help of the approval task. So with the help of the approval task, we can configure the approval workflow in upstream. So if you have to configure in SLP, or we have to configure in sourcing or contract, so we can configure with the help of the approval task. Second question, like whatever the different approval workflow type that Ariba is offering. So we have basically three. One is serial, second is the parallel, and third one is the custom. So we have basically three approval workflow type. So whatever that that approval workflow that we discussed, that something was applicable in case of the upstream. So even we have not discussed like how to configure the approval node. So I shown you how we can configure approval task only. So within the approval task, even I shown you like if you want to configure the different approval node, we can basically configure. So how basically we can configure, that's something we are going to discuss in today's session. So whatever the approval workflow we are going to discuss in today's session, that is only applicable for the downstream. So whatever different solutions are available in downstream, I would not say solutions. So we can say whatever different documents are available in downstream, like for example, purchase requisition, purchase order, receipt, service and receipt, invoice reconciliation, right? Or we can say contract request. So like that, we have that n number of documents that are available in this downstream. So whenever we have to configure the approval workflow in downstream, so we have to follow the different process. So what process we have to follow? That's something we are going to discuss in today's session. So before going to inside the system, like how basically we can configure the approval workflow. So let me just take one example. Even I have one like the example, that's something previously I took. So I'm going to brief you about that requirement, and even if you want to add something, you can basically add as well from your side. So this is our customer requirement. So here we can see basically I discussed with the customer has given this requirement to us. And here, so we have basically the customer requirement is that they want a level 1 approval. So level 1 approval should go to the supervisor. So that means at level 1 approval should determine supervisor of the PI creator. So the person who is basically creating the purchase requisition, so so the system has to determine that his supervisor as the approver of the level 1. Now, same way we have the level 2 as well. So in the level 2, approval should go to purchasing agent. So purchasing agent is nothing. That is a kind of role we can say. So roles in the sense in SAP Ariba, we have to talk about like groups. So in level 2, the customer they are expecting that purchase requisition should go to the purchasing agent. That is the second requirement. Now in third, level 3, approval should go to the purchasing manager. So in level 3, basically customer they are expecting that our requisition should go for that not requisition, and we can take any document as well. The document should go to purchasing manager, but if the PR total value is in between 10,000 to the 50,000. So in this case, we have the one condition here, like if your purchase requisition total value is basically between 10,000 to 50,000, in that case only the system should determine the purchasing manager as the approver. So same way at the level 3 as well, we have another condition, and another condition is that approval should go to finance manager. So now they want to include the finance manager as well, finance department as well. But when? So for that they have given some conditions, like if PR total value is in between 50,001 to 80,000. So in this case, if your PR total value is in between 50,000 to 80,000, so in that case it should go to the finance manager. Right. So this is one requirement that basically we have received from the customer. Now apart from that, they have given some straightforward requirement as well. So in some cases, if in the purchase requisition we have this some specific value. So for example, they have given the region and the commodity code. So in some cases, if that particular document have region US, so in that case it should go to the approver for the user one. So if you have the country, or we can say basically region, that is a US, in that case it should go to the user one for the approval. Same way, if you have the Asia region, in that case basically it should go to the user two. So in case of the Asia, the system should determine user two as the approver. Now they have given some company code as well. Like let's say we have the company code that is 1000, and for 1000 company code, so it should go to the purchasing agent. So again, purchasing agent is a role, so it should determine that approver, the user who have the authorization of the purchasing role, so they have to basically approve it. So generally, it happens even if you see in your backend SAP system. So in the backend SAP system as well. So if you see, we are configuring this workflow in the different way. So sometimes customer they are asking systems to determine the approval based on some specific parameter. For example, based on the GL account, right? Based on the cost center owner, based on the WBS owner or project owner, or based on some macro group something combination, right? So in that case, basically we can say it is a kind of a hard value or a hard coding, basically we can say. So in that case, if we have the particular GL account, like let's say 1000, then it should go to the approver one. If we have the GL account like 2000, then it should go to the user two for the approval. So like that, we may have the different requirement. So I just took one simple example here, and we'll go in the system and we'll see how basically we can configure this approval workflow. But before going to inside the system, do you want to add something? Anyone would like to add something here based on your experience, based on your we can say basically knowledge, something like that?
Apart from the company code, right, is there any other, maybe we can see later, but I'm just thinking, right, is there any other parameters like we can add plan or those?
You can take any parameter. If you want to take commodity code, you can take commodity code, you can take cost center, you can take plant, or whatever parameter you want, you can take.
The purchasing value you should take.
Purchasing value.
Because in
you mean to say for amount, right?
yeah.
Yeah, we can take amount as well. See, It's not only like that hard and fast, like we have to go take only region or commodity code. You can take any like parameter here. So basically here the intention is not only to show you how we can configure the region and company code parameter. The intention is that like in some cases if you are getting some hard value from the customer, like they may ask you based on the price of the like purchase equation, or they may ask you based on like the commodity code, based on the cost center, based on the requester, based on like some plant as well, or based on some purchasing order. So how we can configure that, the concept it is the same here. So don't focus on the parameter. Parameter you can take anyone, whatever you want. Any further comments from anyone? Audrey, tell me. Ganesh. Okay. I don't know. Like whenever I'm asking something, because I become very silent. All right. Okay, so no worries. Let me show you how basically we can configure. So basically, that what is that our goal here. So our goal is not only like this like configuration. So this is something just and we can say a hypothetical example. Like this, you may get the customer requirement. Like this only. I'm not saying exactly you will get this. So this is something just one example I took here. But based on this, you can configure. Once you understand how to put the condition, how to configure the workflow, how to add the approval node. So based on like if you have the idea, you can configure any of the different like conditions here. So it is not mandatory like you have to work on the all the conditions itself. No, so whatever conditions, like if you are aware how to add the conditions or how basically we can add that like other parameter. So if you know, then you can basically work easily, right? For example, how to search the purchase requisition. So if you know how to search the purchase requisition, so if you want to search any other document as well, you can search, right? But you should know from where we have to start. Otherwise, if you don't know from where we have to start, so in that case, nothing will happen, right? Okay.
Sorry, may I ask, right? Is there any constraint? Because actually right now we are not familiar with the approval workflow. So like, yeah, I think for your site, right, have you hit any, what are the constraints, right, in setting up that approval workflow that Ariba workflow doesn't support?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, because because actually right now for us, right, this is our first time, right? I mean, seeing that how the approval workflow. So I mean, like for yourself, right, when you're setting up that the workflow, right, have you come across any constraint or anything, right, that Ariba workflow doesn't support?
Oh, you're asking to me like any challenges or any question?
Yes, correct.
Where I came up like Ariba workflow did not support.
Yes, because we don't know what we don't know. So that's the thing. So like I'm just thinking, right? I mean, if next time if we talk to a client, right, then upfront we know, right, whether can this, I mean, can this be done or not? Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure. Even I came across many challenges, but basically I never seen I could not remember like Ariba was not supporting. So as of now, basically like this. Okay. Let me ask you one question. So what is your experience, Audrey? Like in which SAP module you are working currently?
Because actually right now, like for us, right, I mean like the one is like one is that the employee data. It's on the employee data, right? That maybe that the next level of that the approval. So the supervisor or the manager for one. Then the second is based on the cost center. So based on the cost center, we have to go back to that maybe the HOD department, or maybe based on the budget. So if let's say if it's a budget, then it might be it's budgeted, then it's like route for this approval. Then it's all this actually need customization in SAP. Yeah.
So we can do in the SAP Ariba as well. It does not like no, that means we can't do in the Ariba, we can do.
Okay. Budget will not be right because budget is only in SAP, right? It's not available in Ariba.
No, budget is also in Ariba. We've seen that in this like a purchase system, in the P2P system. We have the budget functionality in the Ariba as well.
Not in sourcing, right? Not in sourcing.
What you will do in the sourcing for the budget? Are you going to purchase something?
No, because actually it's a PR. It's coming from the PR, all those. Yeah. No, just yeah.
So what you will do in this machine? Nothing, right? Okay. Do you have the experience in the SAP MM or SAP S/4HANA? Audrey,
Sorry.
do you have the experience in this SAP MM or SAP S/4HANA?
Yes, I have. Yeah, both.
Oh, that's good. So I think in that case, it's very easy for you to understand as well. So generally, okay, how you are configuring this workflow in this SAP MM or SAP S/4HANA?
Depends. Actually, the old one is a release strategy. Then the new one is that flexible workflow. Usually, right, that the constraint is only that the few parameters that is available in SAP. If we are using any customized parameters, right, those actually will need some kind of development.
A release strategy, basic configuration. Release strategy is not the, we can say, workflow. So release strategy is basically basic configuration. But workflow configuration we have to do with the help of the ABAP consultant. We need our technical consultant, and with the help of them only we can configure the workflow, right, in the SAP MM. Or basically, if you go in the SAP S/4HANA, so in SAP S/4HANA we have the simplified workflow, right? So if you have some idea about the simplified workflow, that is quite similar with the SAP Ariba workflow as well, right? So if you see in the SAP MM, so in SAP MM we have some limitations in the to configure the workflow, right? What are the limitations? So basically, in SAP MM we can configure only the release code up to 8, right? That means basically we can configure the release label up to 8 only. So if you want to extend your release label, that basically we can't do. We can only configure up to release 8 itself, right? So this is a kind of challenges that is there in the SAP MM. So basically in SAP Ariba, or we can say in the SAP S/4HANA, these things are simplified, and now there is no limitations, and whatever the different level you want to configure, you can basically configure. So it is a kind of simplified workflow. Are you getting?
Yes, yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, so if you want to add something here, some scenario here, please let me know. We can basically add. So again, I'm repeating. So basically, discussing of this parameter is something. Okay, so basically, if you if you want to configure, sorry. So just ultimate motto is that I want to explain you how we can configure the workflow. That is our important a goal here. So it is not like, don't think this parameter will be fixed for every configuration. So basically, even if you see in the SAP MM, so in SAP MM as well, whenever we are configuring this release strategy or workflow, so every customer they are having the different requirements, right? So some of the customer they are asking it should go to that that cost center owner, or it should go to something GL based that user, or it should go to something like a supervisor or manager, something like that. So so basically that is vary customer to customer, but if you know how to configure the release strategy and how to build up the logic for the workflow, so you can basically work on any scenario. But until unless if you're not aware how to build up the workflow, how to build up the logic, how to configure the release strategy, so definitely you will have lots of challenges while configuring this approval workflow. So same way, same thing applicable here as well. So here we have to understand how basically we have to configure the workflow. So if you know, so in that case you can work on the different parameter as well. It's up to you. Okay. So now let's go in the system without wasting our time, and we'll see how basically we can configure approval workflow in the SAP Ariba. So whenever we want to configure this approval workflow in the SAP Ariba, so we have to go in our system, and we have to come here, and we have to go in the management. So we have to come in the manage, and here we can see we have one configuration, that is the approval processes. So this approval processes configuration is only applicable for solutions as well. So we have to basically click on the approval processes. Once click on this approval processes, then system will display you that approval workflow screen. And there you will, so whatever the approval workflow that basically you have configured, or whatever the approval workflow that SAP Ariba they have given as a standard, so you will able to see all this approval workflow here. So like here we can see, like we have the different options of this approval workflow. Like we can see basically here first we have this approval type. So what is basically approvable type? Approvable type is nothing, that is our document. So whatever documents basically that is available in downstream. So Ariba has given for all these documents like a standard workflow. So here you will able to see the different workflow. So whatever the workflow basically, or for which document you want to see the approval workflow, you can select any of the document. Like we can see advance payment, budget, card, check request, collaboration request, contract request. Even we have this invoice reconciliation, and receipt requisition. So different objects are available here. So for whatever object you want to basically configure the approval workflow, you can choose any of the object. So for whatever object you want to see that approval workflow, we can select any of the particular object. Like let's say, for example, we want to see the approval workflow for the requisition. So once we select this equation here, then we have to click on the search. And once you click on the search here, then system will show you the list of the document here, like whatever, like different workflow that is configured for the purchase equation that you will able to see. So along with this approval workflow, you will also have the information about the status, like what is the status of your document. So either that is checked in, or that is in draft, or that is basically like active. So whatever status is here, that basically you will able to see. So you will have the different status here. Now, if you want to see any of this approval workflow, you can come here and you can basically check all the information here. Okay. So now basically, if you want to configure this any of this approval workflow from the scratch, so in that case, we have to come here and we have to basically click on this create new. So when you click on this create new here, then what system will do? System will give you one form. So system will give you this form, and here we have to put our title. So whatever title that basically you want to put here, you can put. Like let's say, for example, I'm going to put the title, like let's say PR approval workflow, and I'll give you something like let's say AD, right? So this is the title of my workflow, and now in the next we have to select the approvable type. So for whatever document you want to configure this approval workflow, we have to select the particular document. So let's say, for example, you want to create for the invoice, you can select invoice here. Or if you want to create for the receipt, you can select receipt here. Or if you want to do for invoice reconciliation or service and receipt or requisition, so whatever document you want to choose, you can basically choose. So let's say, for example, I am going to choose here as a requisition. So we have to basically select here as a requisition. And once you select the requisition here, okay. So once you select this approval type, like the document here, then we have the other option as well, the type. So basically in the main document, like whatever main document we have selected in the form of this approvable type. So we have, if we have some document is applicable, in that case only you will able to see the type here. So like here we can see basically we have the type, and in this type we have the different options here. Like we can see aggregated, amendment, or amended requisition. So basically this amendment requisition, amended is not some applicable in our cases. This is something not in use. But amendment means basically that is change requisition. So if you want to trigger approval workflow for that, change requisition, in that case you can select amendment here. And if you want to choose, if you want to configure this approval workflow for the aggregated requisition, we can basically configure for the aggregated requisition as well. Or if you want to configure for the normal PR, so in that case we have to select it as a default. So if you choose a default here, that means that the system will understand we are going to configure approval workflow for this normal purchase requisition. So here one thing we have to understand, like what is basically the aggregated requisition. Do anyone any idea what is the aggregated requisition? Any idea what is the aggregated requisition? Okay. Let me give you one business scenario just to understand what is basically aggregated requisition. For example, let's assume we are working in our company, like with a client, and we are the part of the different department. Or let me tell you in different way. Now let's say there are basically basically in company, like they have the different department, like production department, HR department, marketing, QA department, warehouse department, right? So they have basically the different department. Now let's say one person who belongs from the production department, and he is basically creating one requisition for the notepad. So he requires some notepad, so for some the internal activity. So he is basically creating one requisition for the notepad. Okay, so what basically he will do, he will create the requisition, and this requisition will go for the approval, and post approval, like post fully approval, it will be converted automatically in the purchase order, and that purchase order will be transmitted to the supplier. Now let's assume similarly another user, like from the quality department, he also required the notepad or notebook, we can say. So he has also created one requisition, and that requisition is also transmitted to supplier in the form of the purchase order, right? Now let's say same way, one person from the HR department, he has also created one requisition. So might be in that requisition we have the different item, but that item belongs to the same supplier. So like to whom we send that our first requisition and second requisition. So to that supplier only we are going to send our third requisition as well, like with a different item. Like let's say for example we need stapler. So for the stapler, we have also created one requisition from the HR department, and that requisition is also issued to supplier in the form of purchase order, right? So now basically, if you see from customer point of view, so from customer point of view, we have created three requisitions, right? That means we have basically created three purchase order, and that three purchase order we send it to supplier. So from customer point of view, we are good. So since we require this item from different department, so of course we'll create the purchase order separately, or we'll create the requisition separately. But if you see from supplier point of view, so supplier have some challenges. Now, what are the challenges to supplier? So the one thing basically the two purchase requisition is having the same item, right? So basically for individual purchase order, the supplier has to maintain their record, right? Because they also have to close their the sales order activity as well. So for one purchase order, they have to do the documentation. For another purchase order, they have to do documentation. And from third purchase order as well, they have to do the separate documentation, right? So in this case, if you talk from supplier, so definitely supplier will tell you like why I'm getting the different purchase order, like from on the same day, or within some time frequency. So is there any way you can create a that consolidated purchase order? So whatever different item you required, you can basically create one single purchase order, or we can say as a consolidated purchase order, and you can send it to me. So since we have to dispatch, we have to deliver all the three items to you, like same company, or we can say same customer as well. So why unnecessary they are getting the different purchase order, right? So that is basically the pain area from the supplier point of view. So in that case, definitely supplier will expect you should create one single requisition, or we can create a single purchase order. So how we can meet this customer requirement? I mean, how we can meet this supplier requirement? So in this case, from customer point of view, we are good. Since we belong from different department, that is why we have created the different purchase requisition. But since supplier is expecting to receive only one purchase order, so how we can tackle this? What we can do in this case, right? So in this case, what basically we have to do? So for this, we have to use this aggregated purchase requisition functionality. So what is the aggregated requisition functionality? So we have to basically identify the list of items, like which items are belongs to for the aggregated requisition. So when you identify that list of the item, so in the next, what basically we have to do? So whenever you will create, like let's say for example, we have identified like all these stationery item are basically the part of the aggregated requisition. And we have defined some time frequency as well, like as 4 hours, 2 hours, something like that. So what will happen, like in this case, if your aggregated requisition functionality enabled, so in that case, when that user from the production department, he will create the purchase requisition for that notepad. So that purchase requisition will automatically goes to purchasing workbench. So purchasing workbench basically is one platform in the Ariba. So it will go and it will store the year. So it will not go immediately. It will first go for the approval, and once it will fully approve, then system will not create the purchase order immediately. System will send that purchase requisition to the purchasing workbench. Same way, when the other user from that basically quality department, he will create the purchase equation. Like let's say he created the purchase equation in 1 hour. So then same purchase equation will also goes to purchasing workbench. Now let's assume after some time our HR person, he has also created one requisition. So that requisition is also basically that item is also identified as aggregated requisition. So that purchase requisition will also go to the purchasing workbench. So whatever time frequency that basically you have defined, like 2 hours, 3 hours, so system will wait for that time frequency. And once the time frequency will over, like let's say we define as the 2 hours. So within 2 hours, whatever the purchase requisition that is created and that is identified for the allocated requisition, those purchase requisition will store automatically in the purchasing workbench. And once 2 hours will be over, then system will automatically that all the requisition in single requisition, and system will also create one single purchase order. So in this case, system will not create the multiple purchase order. So system will consolidate all the purchase equation, and it will create a single purchase order, including all the line item, and it will send to the supplier. So that is basically called as a aggregated requisition. So this is a kind of add-on functionality or additional functionality is available in the SAP Ariba, and it will not be available as by default. So if your customer they want to use this functionality of this aggregated requisition, in that case we have to reach out to Ariba customer support, and we have to ask them to enable that particular functionality. Are you guys getting it?
Sorry, so actually, when the PR was created, right, you mentioned that it's automatically go to the purchasing workbench. Yeah, I mean, based on certain time limit, right, then it will convert to the PO upon its approved. So that because actually, if let's say different PR, right, coming from different purchasing department, so like then that might be routing to a different approver. So meaning if let's say
it will come after the fully approved.
Okay, it's only come after fully approved. Okay,
Yes.
can.
Okay. All right. So if you want to create this workflow for this aggregated requisition, then in that case basically we can select aggregated requisition as well. Otherwise, generally we have to select here as a default, and then basically we have to click on the next. So when you click on this next here, then system will create system will navigate you to this approval workflow screen. So this is basically our approval workflow screen. And here we can see we have the this screen is called as approval note screen. We can see we have basically different tab here, like summary tab, approval rules tab, filter rules, approvable edit rule, policies, testing, history. So if you come to summary tab, so nothing to do in the summary tab. So summary tab basically is included only that information whatever we specified in the previous step, like your name of this title of your requisition or approval type or subtype. That's something information will be available here, and mainly we have to work here with this approval rules. So we have to basically come here in the approval rules. So if you see in this page, so we can see we have something that different option. So we have one option that is called as the purchase requisition collaboration, right? So collaboration, this is something also a kind of add-on functionality is available in this SAP Ariba, and that is also called basically a kind of sourcing event we can say, but this is not exactly sourcing event, but basically in some cases if some of the customer they have this Ariba P2P license, and due to some reason, might be due to some budget constraint or due to any reason, he is not unable to take the license of the Ariba sourcing module, but they want to perform the basic negotiation activity within the P2P module itself. In that case, they can basically use the collaboration part. So in that case, basically what they have to do, so they have to basically request to Ariba customer support to enable the purchase requisition collaboration functionality. So what basically we can do in this case, with the help of this functionality, while creating the requisition, you can that invite the different supplier to submit their quotation. So the system will automatically send that notification to the supplier to submit their quotation, and the supplier basically they have to submit their quotation. And then same way, the quotation information will be available to Ariba P2P, and we have to review one quotation. We have to select one particular quotation, and then system will system will submit the purchase requisition for the approval. So that is basically called as a the purchase requisition collaboration, or we can say basically collaboration part. So for that we have the different phases here. Like we can say we have the pre-collaboration, collaboration, and this post-collaboration. So if you want to configure this approval workflow for that the collaboration as well, that basically we can configure. So that is why we can see here we have the pre-collaboration, collaboration option. Post-collaboration is nothing, that is the purchase requisition only, like normal purchase requisition. But if you want to configure for pre-collaboration or collaboration, you can basically configure. So generally we are not configuring, but yeah, Ariba has given this option. So in some cases, if you want to configure the approval workflow for the pre-collaboration and the collaboration as well, you can configure. So that is why this option is available here. So we have to only focus on this post-collaboration part. So once you come here in the post-collaboration, so here basically we can see system has created one approval, right? So this is basically called as an approval node. So now basically we have to start our workflow configuration in this approval node. So we have to provide some basic information and some information here to start our workflow configuration. So you can say this is the approval node, or in general you can say this is the approval label as well. So how basically we have to configure? So now basically we have to come in this downside and we have to come in this approval rule title. So here we have to provide the rule title. So whatever rule title that basically you want to keep here, you can keep. Like let's say for example, I'm going to keep our rule title as simple like label 1. So we'll enter here rule title as a label 1, and same way I'll give this rule description. So as very straightforward, like whatever we took in our example, like this approval should determine supervisor of the PR creator. So we have to basically provide the information of this rule title and the rule description. So basically whenever we are configuring this approval workflow in the real time, so we have to provide better description in this rule description field, so that if any of the other user or other consultant, if he will refer this approval workflow, so he can basically easily understand what are the things that basically we have configured in this approval. So we have to basically provide the summary of this in the rule description. Like if you have included some conditions, you can basically define some conditions here, or you can mention some conditions information here, right? Or if you have some other parameter or something different, there's something also you can basically include here. So it's up to you, like how basically you want to configure, but generally we are following the best practice approach. So we have to provide the better description in this rule description field here. Now, if you see in this case, so the customer requirement is basically very straightforward. That means approval should determine supervisor of the PR creator, right? So in this case, the condition is not applicable. So in that case, we have to the condition step we have to basically skip, because condition is not applicable in this case. We'll talk about conditions in some time. So, but conditions is not applicable in this case, and we have to skip the condition part here. And apart from that, then basically we have to come in the action. So what is the action that basically you are expecting? So our action is that approval should determine supervisor. So supervisor determination is the action, right? So we have to basically select here in the action, like determining the supervisor. So that action basically we have to provide. So when we come in the action, and here we can see we have the two types. So one is add super approvers and the group, and second option is that use approval lookup table. We'll talk about use approval lookup table in coming session. So here we have to select add approvers and the group, and here in the action we have to basically select here as add supervisor. So we have the multiple options are available here. From here we have to select add supervisor. So basically add supervisor means since customer are also expected to determine the PI creator supervisor, so we have to give the input to system, like system has to select the supervisor of the PI creator. Okay. Now in the downside, we have the parameter here. So in the parameter, we have the option of this approval required. So what is basically approval required? So here we can see we have one checkbox here, right? So if you select this checkbox, so in that case, the system will expect to have the approval. So if you select, let's say we have selected this checkbox here, and the supervisor basically we have added in the action. So that means in this case, whenever the supervisor, he will receive the notification for the approval, he will have the option to approve and deny. So he has to basically click on the approve, or either he has to click on the deny. So system will expect to some action from that particular supervisor. But in some cases, like let's say I'm going to uncheck this checkbox. So in this case, the system will understand the supervisor is not the approver, and this supervisor is basically only the watcher. We can say watcher or we can say observer. So in some cases, it may happen, like if you see from customer point of view, so sometimes if you go with the customer, so some of the customer, if they have the contract employee, right? And that contract employee basically is available as departmental head or manager level. So since they are basically the contract employee, so customer, they don't want to give any permission or any authorization for the approval. But since they are the manager, so might be they have the policy, like whenever any requester or that any business user, like who is working down the line, they have to take the approval from the that basically that manager, even though the manager is basically the contractor. So in that case, what they're expecting to have the dummy approval. Dummy approval means that basically they no need to approve document actually, but system will notify them like your approval is required for the requisition. That's it. But nothing to do from their side. So it will send the information to them. Then basically it will pass automatically to the next level. So in that case, in some cases, if you want to use the dummy approver, or we can say as a watcher, so we can basically use here. So in the action, sorry, in the parameter, we have to basically just uncheck this checkbox. Okay. Now in the last, we have the region. So region is a thing that means we can say a kind of tooltip or a kind of text basically. So whatever text you want to configure here. So whatever text you will configure here, that text will be available in the approval workflow as well. So we can configure, we can enter any of the text here. Like let's say, please upload here. Like this, you can basically type the text here, or whatever text you want to mention here, you can basically mention. So like this, we have to configure this approval, one approval node. Okay. Now, before going to next, any question from anyone? Are you guys getting it?
Just one silly question. Let's say if it's going to set as auto approval, then why in the first place need to set approval?
Basically,
I mean,
auto approval by default is not activated in the Ariba, like how it is there in our backend SAP system. So if you want to have the auto approval, in that case we have to enable some parameter. So generally, auto approval you can basically you can configure with the help of the parameter. Alright.
The supervisor ID it will take, sir, because user ID is by using user ID it will take supervisor.
So basically, whenever we are creating configuring user ID in the Ariba, so we must have to specify the supervisor. So from the user profile, it will determine automatically.
Right, is there approval limit? If let's say if within 500 is supervisor, if let's say more than 500, right, it's the first level instead of the supervisor, then it becomes the director.
I'm sorry, come again.
So if because right now it's based on that the user, right? I mean the creator. So you mentioned right in that user profile that will be a supervisor type. Is there a kind of director? All those is only also
anyone. System will not say he's director or he's basically that that VP or CEO. So if that down the line is creating the requisition and if he's reporting director, it will go to direct director only. Okay, but that is the case. That is any exception cases. Generally, it may not happen, and if that is happen, so in that case, customers are expecting to have some exceptions as well, because so usually the customer, they don't want to send any approval notification for a small value to VP, director, or that we can say VC, right? So they want to go with this up to top level, like whenever your purchase requisition will have very high amount. So in that case, they want to put some conditions, not only not simple. All right. Okay. Okay. So now basically in the next, Auto approval will happen automatically if you enable the parameter and if you have the access. Like let's say you are the supervisor, I'm the user and you are my supervisor, and you are basically you have the approval authorization and you are creating the requisition. In that case, system will automatically approve of your label. No need to approve manually. Okay. Okay, so this is something like the first approval node. Now, if you see here, we have basically the other requirement. So what is the other requirement? So in other requirement, we have basically that approval should go to the purchasing agent. So if you see approval should go to purchasing agent, this is something very straightforward. So as similar to the level one, like only the differences is that in level one, we are expecting to approval from the supervisor, and in the level two, we are expecting to have the approval from the purchasing agent. So purchasing agent is nothing that is the roles, and in SAP Ariba, roles basically role term is called as a groups. So in Ariba, basically we are calling the groups for the role. So here basically we have to include the groups, right? So how basically we can configure this thing? So for that we have to go in our Ariba. We have to come here, and we have to basically add the one another approval. So whatever different approval node that basically you want to add, you can add. Like let's say you want to add the serial approval node, you can basically add the serial approval node, or you want to add the parallel approval node, you can add the parallel approval node as well. How we can add the parallel or serial approval node? For that we have to come here and we have to click on this after action menu or before action menu. So if you click on this after action menu, you will have the option to add serial rule. Or if you click the before action menu, you will have the two options: add serial rule or add the parallel rule. So whatever rule and where you want to add, if you want to add the another approval node before this label one, in that case we can add serial or parallel. Or if you want to add after this approval node, we have to come here and we have to add the serial. So this time I will click on this add serial rule. So basically this time we are going to configure at the label 2. So label 2 means we have to add the serial node here, right? So like this, we have to add the serial node here. Now, same way, we have to give the rule title. Like let's say I'm going to give as a label 2, right? And what is the description of the label 2? So we'll enter this description here. Like approval should go to the purchasing agent, right? And in this case as well, the condition is null. Condition is not applicable. So we have to come downside and we have to skip the condition. We'll talk about condition in some time. Now we have to come in the action. So in the action, what basically we are expecting? So we are expecting to determine the groups, right? So what is the group here? We have the group of the purchasing agent. So in this case, we have to come here in the action and we can see by default it is showing as the add group. So nothing to do here. Then we have to come in the downside in the parameter and here we have to select our group. So whatever the group basically you want to add, you can add. Like let's say for example, I want to add the purchasing group agent group here. So we have to select here purchasing agent. And once you select the purchasing agent here, so that means this group will be added. And the next in the region, we can provide any of this tooltip, like whatever you want to do, you can give here. Okay. So like that, basically we have to configure this another approval. Now same way, if you go to other next label, so here basically we have the label 3. Now in the label 3, the customer they're expecting that approval should go to purchasing manager. In that case as well, we have to basically determine the group. But we have some conditions here. And what is the condition? So conditions is basically that that price. So it should go to if the price is 10,000 to 50,000, in that case only it should go to purchasing manager. Otherwise it will skip the purchasing manager. So in this case, we have to basically include our conditions as well. And we can see we have the label 3. That means we have to configure serial approval rule here. So how basically we have to configure? We have to come in this our approval node. And we have to basically again add another serial rule here. So we have to come here and click on this drop down and click on this add serial rule. So when you basically click on this add serial rule, the system will add one more serial rule here. Now, whatever the rule title you want to put, you can put, like let's say I'm going to put label 3. Okay. So we have to basically give the label 3 here. Then we have to enter this rule description. Like whatever description you want to add here, you can basically add here. Right. Now in the next, basically, if you see, so here we have the condition. right? So that means we have to put some value condition. So it's not only the price value condition. This is something, whatever condition you want to add, you can add. It's up to you. How basically we can add the condition? So for that, we have to come downside here in the conditions, and we have to click on this all or true. So we can see this condition is automatically added here by default. So we have basically click on this drop down all or true, and here we have to click on the filter text. So how system will come to know like what is the value of this, like that. Okay. I think let's talk about the condition part in the next session, because we have the limited time, and it may take some time as well. So if we start this condition topic, then again we have to repeat and then next session as well. So this part we'll see in the next session. Okay, so any question from anyone? I think let's conclude today's call. That's it for today. So any question from anyone?
If let's say just now I understand you are showing the requisition. Actually, I'm also trying out because right now when I select the document type, right, I cannot find any sourcing project for. If let's say I can see there's a sourcing request, I cannot see there's a sourcing project. If let's say I want to create for a sourcing project, which document type should I select?
I'm sorry. Come again. What are you trying to do?
No, okay. I was also trying, right? I was like looking for the document. I was looking for a sourcing project. I can see sourcing request, but I cannot see sourcing project. In the event if we need to create for the sourcing project, which document type should we select?
No, where you're looking that sourcing project or sourcing request? Where?
When we select create, right? Create, then the one that we choose, the document.
You meant to say here? Like the
very first one you show us, right? Yeah, the one, the document type. You explain that yeah, yes, approval type, yes.
Audrey. Earlier we discussed like this workflow configuration is only applicable for the downstream solutions, not for upstream. Sourcing project is part of upstream, not the downstream.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So if let's say the sourcing, right, if I mean a certain approval, right, to like the setting out that approval rules to for during the award, right? So meaning it's not going through the same process here.
No, this is only applicable for downstream, not for the upstream. Sourcing project is a part of upstream only.
Oh, okay.
The required mandatory means it should be approved, then only it will go to the next.
Yes. Right.
So once you keep somewhere you are not required, next you keep required, like that you can do it, na?
No, required. No, not required. We have this approval. Yes, approval required. Correct. Wherever you keep at the like approval required, not false. In that case, we can skip.
Wherever you want, we required. Otherwise, we will keep blank. Then it is not required. That particular trigger to that person, they may.
Right. Okay, guys. So that's about today, and thank you so much. Do the practice on the weekend, and it's on Monday, Sunday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.